Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for this special hour-long show, Navigating the Great Lakes, Life on the Lee A. Tregurtha. After spending over 37 hours on board the Lee A. Tregurtha, I didn't want to leave. Of our time on the ship, my videographer and I slept very little, a few 2-hour naps here and there. One night, closing our eyes for maybe 5 hours. There was so much to see, I did not want to miss a moment. We'll be talking with my videographer, Stephen DeLatorante, later in the program to get his perspective of the ship, documenting the crew and all we saw along our leg. I spent a lot of time just watching, often from a distance, the crew interacting, working, laughing, reminiscing of home, or detailing what their first stop off the boat would be. Steak and shake, cookie crumble, hanging with their families, taking a trip, completing house projects. They talked about any and everything. But when there was work to be done, they dove in. They pushed hard, focused on the task at hand. They cackled as one would yell, "Let's go, every day's a Monday," because time really is irrelevant. Remember the first lesson, Lee A. Tregurtha moves at her own pace. I'm not sure what I expected, but what I was a part of was so much more than I could have ever anticipated. And so it's time for our final leg. Waking up to a beautiful sunrise in the St. Mary's River as we move along Drummond Island and make the turn into Lake Huron, heading for the Mackinac Bridge. I wouldn't say it was a particularly extraordinary sunrise, and yet it was, for the simple fact that it was morning aboard the Lee A. Tregurtha. Navigating the St. Mary's River mostly happened overnight in the dark, so taking in the last stretch, well, I didn't want to miss it. A crew member navigated the Lee A at all times while on the river. There's no autopilot being used here to move through the narrow openings and around islands. This island is a familiar one, Drummond Island, and it marks a turning point for the freighter as it shifts out of the river and into Lake Huron. An easy, beautiful morning with much to look forward to.
We're looking forward to more great weather while it lasts. Typically, once we get into the fall time of the season, we all know the winds are going to pick up, and so we're really enjoying the easy winds right now and the easy sailing, I guess you could call it. I'm just looking forward to getting to Burns Harbor without scratching the paint.
And that's exactly what the day brought, a peaceful cruise. But it wasn't without a bit of excitement and awe. One of the highlights of taking this route from Marquette to Burns Harbor was the chance to go under the Mackinac Bridge. I was grateful. The sun was up, the weather was perfect, and the opportunity didn't miss us. We passed Mackinac Island, taking in the landmarks, the Grand Hotel easily visible, and we patiently waited for that moment as remarkable as I'd hoped.
There are some days out here you'll see things that I've told my wife many a times, I'm like, I wish you could see what I'm seeing right now. There's some completely amazing things that nobody will ever see, and you can't even explain it to them.
It was a perfect start to a long final stretch. We had 15 hours left to Burns Harbor. Lake Michigan was calm, quiet. In the distance, I noted the Sleeping Bear Dunes, a faint Chicago skyline. On board, the crew used this time to catch up on maintenance around the boat, from painting to cleaning. It seemed upkeep on the Tregurtha never stopped. From the time we boarded to the time we left, there was always something to do. As the hours went on, the projects were cleaned up and preparations began to be made for our arrival to Burns Harbor.
We'll get in there. The facility will have like a hopper, and we'll swing the boom over the hopper and unload iron ore. And then after that, what they do with it is actually somewhat of a mystery to me. They put it in a big furnace and they make a big slab out of it.
The Lee A. Tregurtha is 826 feet long. It is one of 10 commercial vessels within the Interlake Steamship Company. Now picture this, over the course of the season, these ships cross the Great Lakes more than 500 times, stop at 50 different ports, and transport over 20 million tons of raw material.
It's nearly effortless, the giant freighter docking in the harbor. The landscape here, very different from the Marquette shore we left. It's industrial, it's dirty, and today, the conveyor belt at the harbor needed to unload was being repaired. and so the crew of the Tregurtha would have to wait. Regardless, there's a sense of accomplishment. Over 37 hours navigating the Great Lakes. The cargo and crew has arrived safely. They'll spend the next 10 to 12 hours here and then turn the Lee A around and head back to Marquette for another shipment. They'll face a new set of circumstances, changing winds and weather conditions. But at the end of the day, they'll have each other and they'll have the Lee A Tregurtha.
I love that everyone comes together in the easy situations and then in the bad situations. And I don't mean dangerous situations, I mean long hours, dirty. They come together to accomplish the common goal. And that goal is to provide cargo to our customers throughout the Great Lakes.
Burns Harbor was where I got off the boat, and I'm not going to lie, I was a bit disappointed the unloading wasn't going to happen. Before we arrived, I was able to go down to the very bottom of the ship and take a look at what that process would look like, one that requires the deckhands to sit for hours down below, ensuring every pellet of iron ore makes it back to land.
All right, we are about as far below deck as you can go on this ship. Don't even know how many feet. We're not even going to think about that right now, but we're in a really cool spot of the ship, and I want to have our chief engineer explain what's going to be happening down here when we get to Burns Harbor and start to unload the iron ore pellets, because this is kind of where all the action happens. While obviously it's going to be going into the hopper on the surface, it all depends on everything below here. So explain what all this is. We can't get down in there too far because there's some water down there right now, but explain it for us.
All right, so we're in the unloading system right now, or the tunnel. We've got a conveyor belt that runs the entire length of this unloading tunnel, which is almost the whole length of the ship. There is about 70 or 80 gates, which we open up hydraulically, just a few inches at a time, up to a foot maybe, and that'll dump the ore onto the belt as it's moving, and then the belt is running in a clockwise motion from our perspective here. So the cargo is gonna head back here. It's a pinch belt system. So as it gets back towards the end right here, that other belt is gonna be encapsulating that ore as it goes all the way up, because there's a pretty good length of just like straight vertical. So that whole way up, the ore is just stuck between the two belts, where then it kind of curves back over and it'll dump into the boom hopper, which is what you see outside, which then goes into the hopper on the dock.
And so this was the end of my time with the Lee A. As I looked back at the crew, it was all a bit surreal. All that I witnessed, the dedication, the hard work, the physical and mental strength, the beauty of the Great Lakes. I will never forget this journey or this crew. Up next, I sit down with my videographer, his perspective, and his work behind the camera.